32 teams, 32 days. Today, the Indianapolis Colts. Welcome to a series where we deep dive on every NFL team's offseason from the very beginning, when head coaches were being hired, all the way to present day with preseason happening. Here's a list of videos that we're going to be dropping for 32 straight days from August 1st to September 1st. If you see a team that you're a fan of, I encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button so you can stay notified when we drop that video on that respective date. By the time that this video drops, the Colts have already played their first preseason game against the Baltimore Ravens. A lot that we learned in that game, including how they utilized their starters. Unfortunately, there's some injuries that come along the way, which we'll talk about in just a bit. But to kick off the deep dive of the 2025 Colts, let's start with the main man in charge, that is the head coach, Shane Steichen. Going into his third season, 17-17 record to boast, 50% of the time he's winning his games right down the middle. But looking at that record, you would assume that the Colts would be a lot worse, just because they don't get a lot of media attention. They're not really considered a playoff contender year after year. However, that's not been the case. I mean, in 23, they were just one drop pass away from making the playoffs. They had a winning season. They were 9-8. And then fast forward to 24, they regressed a little bit, but they were still able to pull out 8 games. And it says a lot about Steichen and how he's able to rally the team together regardless of the roster that he's been given. I'm not comparing him to... I'm not saying that Steichen's going to be one of the greatest coaches of the modern era, but someone that is Mike Tomlin, because he's known for this. Doesn't have the best roster. You would assume that they'd be a losing team. However, he's able to rally and able to have winning seasons year after year, make the playoffs. Never had a losing season as his tenure of the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, if the Colts still perform this year, this may be his last season. However, if they do get around that middle of the pack year again, given that the roster that they have, one, it would say a lot about him as a head coach, how he's able to do that, but also, I think he'd be safe for another year. The offensive coordinator stays the same. That is Jim Bob Cooter, who's been with Steichen since he's the head coach since 23, and in 2023, they were 15th in yards put up and 13th in 2024. So they are in the top half of the NFL, and a lot of credit has to be given to that run game. Defensively, they needed to make a shift. Lou Anarumo is now the new defensive coordinator, and the Colts in the last 2 years, yards given up, 24th in 2023, 29th, bottom 5 in the league last year. So Anarumo, they hope, can provide that spark. He's well-respected, very talented defensive coordinator. However, his success on paper, maybe it's the roster that's given to him, but from 2019 to 2024, when he was the DC in Cincinnati under Zach Taylor, they were ranked 29th, 26th, 18th, 16th, 31st, and 25th. I will say this, however, he is well respected around the league, and actually a few years ago, he was considered a head coaching candidate, so maybe there is something there, and maybe he can turn this Colts defense around. Moving on to the free agency adds and losses. So if we compare the adds to the losses, it is extremely lopsided. Only 4 big adds that they had, and Shavarius Ward and Cam Bynum, that's where the most money goes to, $60 million each. They needed that big boost to that secondary, and those two we expect to start right away. And speaking of that secondary, they actually added Corey Ballentine for a hot minute, but they let him go on August 1st, and now he is back with the Green Bay Packers. But another big ticket signing that they had was Daniel Jones, 1 year, $14 million to compete with Anthony Richardson. I'm a positive person, so I will look at it at a positive perspective. For Jones, maybe in the 69 starts that they had with the New York Giants, they didn't unlock his potential. Maybe there's something that we missed. Maybe there's something that NFL teams know more than we do, which is true. They know a lot more than we do. However, I will say, playing 69 games, you get a good idea of what a player is going to be for the rest of their career. And I get that there's resurgences like Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield, but in the case of Darnold, he only played 56 games before he had that resurgence with the Minnesota Vikings. For Mayfield, he had a couple of good seasons. We saw the good in Mayfield before he signed with the Bucs, and it was only for a 1 year, $7 million prove-it deal, whereas Jones signed for double that, $14 million. I get he's young. I get that he could be a potential starter over Anthony Richardson, but if you just wanted to bring in an arm to compete with Richardson, maybe for just this season, just to make sure that you have someone reliable You could have brought in a cheaper option at quarterback, someone that's around the same level as Daniel Jones. And those guys might be Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Jameis Winston. I'm not saying that any of these quarterbacks are long-term solutions. I'm just saying if you needed to bring in that competition, there were cheaper options. They also could have gone down that route of Joe Milton, been in the running for him. Him and Anthony Richardson, very, very similar. Big-bodied, raw, athletic ability, huge arm, and can also run with the ball. It is what it is. Let's just see what happens. Moving on to the NFL draft, Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State. This is Tyler Warren's show. None of this rotational stuff with Mo Alley Cox and Kylen Granson. It's going to be Warren that's going to be heavily featured in this offense because Shane Steichen, for the last couple of off seasons, has stated that tight end is a position that he would love to feature one day. Didn't do it in 2024, but in 2025, actually prior to the NFL draft, before the draft of Warren, on April 1st, Shane Steichen said that tight end could be a featured position this year in 25. And then on May 2nd, after watching Tyler Warren in practice, Shane Steichen says, watch what he does with the ball in his hands inside the 5-yard line. What he does is, in his words, cool. And then on May 27th, he was targeted early and often in OTAs by both quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. So he's not going to be a big 150 targeted receiver like Brock Bowers was for the Raiders, just because of the nature of the offense. It's a run-first offense. There's a lot of question marks at quarterback. However, could he be pushing 85, 90, 95 targets this season? Absolutely. He'll definitely be a featured piece for the Colts offense. Moving on to the second round, JT Tuimoloau. He's more of a rotational piece just because they have their set starters in the former first-round pick in Kwity Paye, and then last year's first-round pick in Laiatu Latu, but he's going to be working in, and it's good depth after you lose Deo Dangbo and Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis on that defensive line. To the third round, Justin Wally. Man, this is a heartbreaker. Tearing your ACL in a preseason game. For the Colts, we had him as a projected starter on the outside and that outside corner position. We'll talk about who we think is going to fill in that role when we talk about projected starters. However, for Wally, wish him nothing but the best. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery, comes back stronger next year in 2026. And then moving down the list, Jalen Travis, DJ Giddens, 5th-round pick from Kansas State. He is their running back 2 right now. He is working with the first-team offense, and if you watch that preseason game against the Ravens, it is clear that he is ahead of Khalil Herbert on that depth chart. So, yes, Jonathan Taylor, he will still get the ball 330, 340 times this season, but that running back 2 in Jim Bob Cooter's offense also gets north of 100 carries, and we expect it to be Giddens. And then Riley Leonard. I think there's a lot of Colts fans that are hoping that he can get a run at that starting quarterback job just because he's from Notre Dame, so pretty local. But this year it's going to be Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, and we don't expect Leonard to see any snaps. But moving on to that projected starters, the depth chart, Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, according to their unofficial depth chart. As of right now, we have Richardson. Now, he did dislocate his pinky in that preseason game against the Ravens. However, there's a report that came out saying that it's just considered day-to-day, so he should be fine by week 1. As of right now, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's Richardson just because on August 1st, Shane Steichen gave him high praise, said that everything is cleaner now, and he's playing at a high level. So the nod should be given to the veteran, if you consider who's been on that team longer. Moving on to running back, Jonathan Taylor. We talked about DJ Giddens being that RB2. Khalil Herbert going to be that RB3. The wide receivers, Michael Pittman Jr., his job is safe. There's no question about that. Josh Downs, the slot receiver. He's going to be the wide receiver 2 in that offense. And then Alec Pierce over Adonai Mitchell is what we project as a wide receiver 3. It could be a toss-up. They could rotate both guys in and out. However, things coming out of camp right now are saying that they want to feature Pierce as that wide receiver 3. He's known as a deep threat, jump ball guy that can average 18 yards per reception. However, what they're saying out of camp is we need to get him on the field more. We need to create more targets for him to get more volume for him. So underneath things, underneath routes, chain movers, those kind of routes, we expect Pierce to run a little bit more. We expect him to be the wide receiver 3, but that's not to say that Mitchell isn't going to get his fair share of 55, 60 targets this season. And then that offensive line, we talked about Ryan Kelly moving on. Will Fries as well. He went on to the Minnesota Vikings. This is confirmed by Shane Steichen a long time ago that Matt Goncalves is more than likely going to be that starting right guard. He'll be filling in for Fries. Then the projected starters for defense, we expect a 4-3 or a 4-2-5. Latu and Paye are the edge rushers, those 2 former first-round picks. And for pay, we actually didn't mention this, but this is his 5th-year option that he's playing on right now. So we don't know if he's going to be re-signed. Has been looking good the last couple of seasons, but JT Tuimoloau, we mentioned, was a second-round pick, could be a future starter and replace Pay if they can't get a contract extension. But that D-line in the middle with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart as solid as ever. The linebackers, I'm going to highlight a 4-2-5, so only mentioning 2 linebackers, Cameron McGrone and Zaire Franklin. There's no question about them. They're going to be the starting linebackers. And then the 5 secondary players are going to be Cam Bynum and Shavarius Ward. We talked about it as being the 2 free agent signings, Bynum at free safety, Ward as that outside corner. Justin Wally, we had opposite of Ward as that starting corner. However, with his ACL tear, we now believe it's between Juju Brents and Jalen Jones. You could also throw Kenny Moore in there. However, even with the injuries that they had at corner last season, Kenny Moore still stayed in that nickel back position. So with him getting up there in age, this is just the role that really fills and fits him. So Moore we expect to be the nickel back. However, on the outside, Jones, he started 17 games last season, which is pretty good. However, last season, that defense was ranked 29th in yards given up. Then you have Juju Brents, who is a second-round pick, has a lot of potential, is talented. However, he hasn't been able to be healthy. 9 games played in 2023, and then only 2 in 2024. So if Brents can stay healthy, we expect him to be the starting cornerback because there's a lot more potential. We've already seen a lot of Jalen Jones. There's a lot more to be seen from Juju Brents. The projected starters for special teams, Matt Gay is gone, and in comes in Spencer Schrader, who actually was an Indianapolis Colts when he was signed as an undrafted free agent prior to 2024. He was just brought in to be a camp leg, but he moved on from the team, went to the New York Jets, started a game for them, made both of his field goal attempts, went over to the Chiefs, started 2 games for them, made 3 field goals, with one of them being a game-winning field goal against the Carolina Panthers. So very eventful rookie season for an undrafted free agent. Now he comes back to the Colts. He's expected to be their long-term starter. And moving on to projected stats for the 2025 season, I wanted to put both quarterbacks up on the screen, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. We don't know how it's going to shake up, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that Richardson is going to start 9 games. Daniel Jones is going to start 8. Kind of split it down the middle. It's going to be a vast improvement from last year with that 8 touchdown to 12 interception ratio that he had. You're not going to have that Joe Flacco guy or that Gardner Minshew guy that's going to be feeding Josh Downs in his role. His role is going to take a big hit when we talk about wide receivers in just a bit. But these are the stats that I have projected for the quarterbacks of the Colts. And then the running back position, Jonathan Taylor, I mean, there's no question about it. He's going to have yet again another big season. Over 330 carries for 12 rushing touchdowns and 1,500 yards rushing. Actually, in my projections, it's 1 Saquon Barkley, 2 Derrick Henry, and then 3 Jonathan Taylor and yards rushed in the NFL. And then wide receivers, Michael Pittman, we expect to have the same role as last season. So kind of very similar stats where he put up 800 yards. We expect 800 yards again, but he'll be the leading targeted guy on that Colts team. Josh Downs, I gave him 100 targets. Maybe Daniel Jones can target him heavily. Maybe Anthony Richardson can, but they utilize their legs a lot. And then Alec Pierce, we talked about being that wide receiver 3, getting a little bit more volume compared to the seasons past, but we expect him to step up over Adonai Mitchell. And then that first round tight end and Tyler Warren, 85 targets for 57 receptions, 616 yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. In that preseason game against the Ravens, there were about 20-ish snaps that the Colts played with their starters, and Tyler Warren played on all 20 of those snaps. All 3 drives that the starters played, Tyler Warren was on the field. So a heavily featured guy in a run-first offense. But those are our stat projections, and to wrap up the video, we have record projections. So I don't just give one record and say anything outside of that is wrong. I like to give a window of somewhere between 5 games to 9 games is what I project, a floor and a ceiling. And if you look at the graphic, that's what I project for the Indianapolis Colts. 5-12 is their floor. Their ceiling is 9-8, but what we expect for them is 7-10. So regardless, we don't expect a division win or a playoff appearance. A lot of people might be looking at this team and saying, well, you can't say that they're going to go 7-10. This team might be a 4-13 team. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Shane Steichen has this Mike Tomlin kind of way of gathering people together and winning games regardless of what the roster looks like. So may not be 8-9 or 9-8. I'm going to say closer to 7-10, but I don't believe it's going to be 4-13. Actually, as a matter of fact, I believe the floor is going to be 5-12. A lot of this is based off of swing games as well, games that could go back and forth. And on their schedule, all division games, they could split, honestly, with the Texans, with the Jaguars. They could surprise a lot of people with the Titans as well. The Steelers, the Falcons, the Raiders, the Cardinals, those games, they could go back and forth between them and the Colts. But that's all I have projected for the 2025 Indianapolis Colts. Let me know your thoughts. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said in this video, leave a comment down below. I'd love to interact with you guys. Also, make sure you guys subscribe to this channel. If you love this 32-team deep dive series, subscribe to this channel so you can stay notified when we come out with a video every single day for the month of August. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals, so make sure you guys subscribe to this channel and look out for that video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow.